Hello. All right. So I'm going to wait just a moment or two. I know it is 7 o'clock on the dot, but I figure I'll give it just a minute, see who ends up joining us, and we can get going from there. Something you'll notice is that we have a little chat on the corner here. I will be interacting with the chat. Please feel free to ask questions. My mic seems like it's going into the red a bit. Is everyone still able to hear me okay? Awesome. I just want to make sure I wasn't clipping too bad. It's kind of hard to get a gauge every now and then, even though I'm looking right at a gauge. But yeah, I'll be interacting with chat. So even if I'm in the middle of saying something, bother me, say what's up. I don't understand. You didn't explain it very well. You know, the usual. I'm glad that my dog is deciding to be loud right now. It's a good time to be loud. Happy isolation, everyone. Yay. But you know what, Neko? At least you get to join me. People in Seattle get to enjoy the local meetup. So that's something fun. All right. So let's get started. I'm sure more people will join as we go. But this is building a blog with Gatsby. Quick introduction to Gatsby. This is in place of a physical SAC.js meetup. So I want to say thank you to Andy, who's kind of allowed me to somewhat hijack the current set of events so that we can continue this event virtually. Again, seems like we have more people on, so if you have any questions, I have a chat right here. We'll be able to follow along. So even if I'm in the middle of saying something, just go ahead and stop me. So first off, what is Gatsby? Gatsby is a framework. It utilizes React and GraphQL, lets you add some components to your build steps in React. You can highly extend it with plugins. You can do all sorts of stuff, and it allows you to make It's a static site generator. Sorry, don't know why I struggled so much with saying that one. But what is a static site generation tool? Like, what is that? That doesn't mean anything to me. So to explain this, we're going to have to go into and explain how a normal site would render the content, how a React site would render the content, and so on and so forth. So how does an HTML website work? In this example, you would build the HTML, the CSS on your developer machine. Yes, live at SAC.js. So you would build your HTML, CSS, JavaScript on your machine. You'd ship it to your server. You might use Apache. You might use a CDN. And then when your user requests that data, you return an HTML page for every route. And then that handles the browser handles the DOM, which it interpolates your HTML, parses it, displays the content to the user. Pretty straightforward, very introductory, but I figured I'd include it here to contrast with how React websites work. So if you use a React website single page application without using something like Next.js or Gatsby, this is basically how this works. So instead of shipping HTML for every single route and CSS for every single route, you will ship your React code, which will in turn have their own routes and their own JSX, which will generate HTML once it reaches the client machine. So again, HTML, JavaScript sent to the server, you request it, you get it. But then there's an extra step. Once you hit the user machine, you have to render that JSX into HTML. This is totally fine for smaller applications, but it does introduce some downtime. Time that usually is spent parsing that JavaScript. You might have a loading spin or something like that, but regardless, it is additional time. So someone thought, what if instead of rendering my content on the user machine, I'm able to render it on the server? So this is how server-side rendering works. Instead of rendering the React on the user machine, you render it on the server directly. So you'll build with SSR in mind. So usually you'll have an SSR framework, you'll have React code, you'll ship that to the server. The server, every time it gets a request, it will replicate and produce HTML from the React JSX. It will ship that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to the user machine, and it's back to being just as fast as it was beforehand. Additionally, because you're on the server, which has a significantly better network connection than most client devices, you're able to do things like network calls to hydrate your UI. So let's say that I'm using a list view of everything in my database. Well, traditionally, I would have to ship a loading spinner to the user. Once the user got that content, then I would go make the database call, and then I would be able to return the database call, get the data, and then display the content to the user. Well, instead of that, we're able to, on the server, make the database call before we ship anything to the client after a request, make that database call, get the database call back, and use that to initialize an early version of the UI that we can then ship down as HTML and CSS to the user. This means that you have much, much faster optimization for certain specific use cases. And one of the nice things is that you tend to have better SEO as a result. Google handles websites that use React on the client side a bit differently. So this is called server-side rendering. That's called client-side rendering. Client-side rendering is almost discouraged in a certain way. From Google, you tend to have lower scores, or at very least, your scores are deferred by a few days. So this is a nice method. One problem with it, though, is that you no longer get a host with Apache. So if you have a CDN that you want to host through geosparse data, you can't do that anymore. You have to now have a dedicated server that runs something like Express for Angular Universal or Next.js. You have to handle it as a server itself that can interpolate requests and then send data back. So we were able to pass the buck from the user machine to the server. What happens if we pass the buck down to the developer? This is where static site generation comes into play. In this case, you have a build step. So if anyone has used Create React app, you'll notice that there is Babel configs, and every now and then you can add TypeScript or SCSS, something like that. And once you do that build, in an SSG website, you add another step. So once you go through the typical build of transpilation and CSS compilation, all of that other stuff, you'll simply render the initial version of JSX to HTML and CSS. You'll ship that to the server, just like you would a normal HTML, CSS website, and then you're able to use the CDN again. The obvious downside here is that you no longer have that same type of like server go make database call. But the nice part is you get a very early version of your UI shipped to the user without having to display a spinning waiting indicator or something like that. You can even disable JavaScript on your client machine and still use your website because you're no longer required to use React on the client website in order to render things on screen. So you get better performance, or at least very early time to interactive. You have much better SEO. It's pretty cool. And this is what Gatsby does. So Gatsby allows you to render your React code early on your developer machine during build, send that to the server, and then have it act like a normal HTML website. So here's a few pros and cons. I'm going to move the chat and hope that it doesn't break. So vanilla HTML is super fast, but it's super hard to scale. If anyone has tried to use web components, that's one method, but outside of that, it's very difficult to scale a plain vanilla HTML website to large sizes. Client-side rendering is easy to scale, it's easy to engineer, but there's SEO concerns. You have to enable JavaScript, all sorts of stuff. Server-side rendering allows you to do query-based optimization, and you get the whole network at your disposal. But you do have to do a bit more dev effort than you would for client-side rendering. You need a specific server, which obviously means that your server has a heavier load on it in general. So there's advantages and disadvantages to server-side rendering. And then static site generation allows you to generate your UI very early on, but not have to do as much usual dev work as server-side rendering. Depends on the framework, obviously. But then the nice part is you can use a CDN for hosting. So if you look at these pros and cons and you think about what a blog might have, a blog has a high use case for SEO. It's very layout dependent, so there's not a whole lot of database querying. You typically write a post and then you deploy. So if you look at what things you're looking for in a blog, static site generation is perfect for it. Another great use case for static site generation is like a landing page for a product. So let's say that you want people to look at your awesometool.com-buy. That would be a good use case for static site generation as well. All right. So now that we've explained what SSR is, or SSG and SSRs, let's build a blog. We're going to set a set of guidelines. I'm going to move the chat again. Oh, you broke. Are you going to go away? Hang on. Sorry, Restream chat is very touchy about moving it. All right, so here's our goals. We want to have Markdown support, just because Markdown is very easy to parse, very easy to write. You can have tools like Typora that lets you edit them like Word documents. We want to have multiple authors. For my blog, it's been advantageous for us to be able to support more than one author for one post. So if you ever need to have multiple people, you're able to just have that support out of the box. We want to be able to have an author page. So for example, an author for Crutchcorn that lists all of their blog posts that they've created. We want to be able to have solid SEO, which is something we'll go over. We want to be able to have pagination because obviously you don't want 100 items on one page. So yeah, now that we have a clear definition of what we want to do, let's build a blog. So Gatsby, like most tools nowadays, has their own CLI. It allows you to generate a starter template with just one line of code. Well, one command, I should say. I've already ran that command because I do not trust the demo gods. They have been mean to me in the past, as they are for everyone. And there's one thing that I should mention is that there's an initial commit, and then the only other thing that I've done is I've added some dependencies that we're going to run into later, but that's just so that I don't have to run npm install. So let's take a look at the code. So we have 4 files here. We have Gatsby browser, Gatsby config, Gatsby node, and Gatsby SSR. If we look under our package JSON, we also have, how do you show your branch name in new terminal in PowerShell? I use a program called CMDER. CMDER allows you to have multiple different like UI elements, and then yes, I'm using the new terminal, but I'm importing the settings from the program CMDER. So if we look under our package JSON under scripts, we have build, we have develop, we have format, kind of generic stuff. So serve is going to be our development mode, or actually start is going to be our development mode. And then build is obviously going to be that build step in question. I love how it's displaying the chat twice. That's not common. Okay. So if we could quickly look at our pages, we have an index. Hi people. We have page 2. We have a 404 page. That's about it. So let's open up our terminal, run npm run start. I know I could have just done npm start, but it's all the same. Just to at least take a look at what we have so far. Come on. Cool. Luckily, it's a pretty lightweight site right now, as one might expect from an initial starter template. All right, so we're going to go to localhost 8000. Cool. So we can see, hi people, this is your new site. We can see we have routes here. And these routes, they're kind of interesting because source pages, these names define which page they are. So if you put like, if I copy page 2 and then I paste it and then I do page 3, it will fail because it failed for some reason. But what will happen is that we'll now be able to go to / page 3 once the server starts. There we go. So now you can see, even though it says page 2 up here because I copied and pasted page 2, we're able to go to / page 3. We'll see later how we can define different routes and even dynamic routes based on data. But for now, we're just going to remove that. Let's see here. So we also have the browser. So Gatsby allows you to configure their build tools highly. So you'll notice that there's Gatsby node. This is what you're able to put in here for, they have specific names for their APIs. So if you go to type in like exports.source nodes, you're able to configure some of the GraphQL settings, but we'll get to that in a bit. But basically, you're able to configure what you're doing on runtime, during the build process, so on and so forth. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a markdown page. I want to put them all in a folder called posts. I'm going to make every subfolder the name, the URL for the post. So for example, I want it to be website.com /post / this post. And this last bit, the identifier, is going to come from the name of that folder in particular. And then I'm just going to have an index.markdown. I'm going to copy an existing markdown file that I have here, which is just heading 1, some text, and then a quote block. I've already installed 2 packages, which is the package for file system and transformer remark. Source file system allows you to add in files from your file system, pretty self-explanatory. And then transformer remark allows you to take markdown files and utilize them in kind of interesting ways. So if we look under Gatsby config, you can see that we have some initial site metadata, which we can query in different ways later on. We have helmet, which is for SEO. We have source file images, which is how you are able to display the images on the index page. We're going to add 2 more. We're going to do resolve Gatsby source file system. We're going to provide options with a path of your name / posts. So what we're saying here is that from this directory, add everything inside of / posts. And then we're going to call it blog because we have to have a name for each of these file system accesses. We're going to add a second one. So now that we have the items in blog recognized, we now want to handle them as markdown files so that we can utilize their information later. Transformer remark with options of plugins with an empty array. So just as we have plugins to Gatsby itself, we have plugins to the remark plugin. So what you can do is you can have images changed in a certain way. We're not going to touch any of that today just because it's kind of a pain, but we can do that. So now, if we restart our build because we've edited something at the base, we will not see any changes, which is true. Like I say that in a kind of funny tone, but we actually won't see any changes. If we go to localhost 8000, everything's going to appear the same. But the way we can tell if something works is that we can go to 8000 / __ GraphQL. What this allows us to do is this is all of the metadata that Gatsby has from the build. So Gatsby keeps a bunch of metadata. So for example, if you go to site, that's not what I wanted. Never mind. I'm going to give up on trying to find whatever I was trying to find. But what you're able to do is you're able to say all of this markdown data, so all markdown data remark, let's look at the node and the HTML that will be generated. So we can see now that the heading 1 of heading 1, the hello world, and the block quote are all being able to be generated. And that's handled by the configuration plugins. So now that we have that, let's start creating some pages. Or actually, we need a unique way, so we need to be able to get this post as the slug. Slug is just a common term for like what's shorthand. I'm again going to copy some code from an existing code base that I did just for this talk. And essentially what this says here is the Gatsby source file system NPM package, it allows you to have the file path. So what we can do is we can get the last item from the file path and set it as the value for a field called slug for all of the nodes that are called markdown remark. And this onCreate node is ran every time that we start the build. So if I stop the build and then restart it, we should see. It's weird doing a drum roll all by yourself. We can now see that I have a new fields extension here. So the property fields is now added to the GraphQL schema, so we can query it and see that this post is rendered. So let's list the posts. We will create a new folder called templates because we want them to be dynamic. We don't want them to be like just /list. We'll explain why a little bit later. Hint, it's for Page Nation. We're going to call it bloglist.jsx. I'm again going to copy and paste some of this code. So you'll see that I'm grabbing page context as one of the properties on this component, the posts on that, and then we're mapping that through. But where does this come from, right? Seems a little bit sketchy. Well, it comes from Gatsby Node. With Gatsby Node, we're actually able to say, hey, give us this data. So I'm going to, again, grab some code from one of my plugins. So here we have the exports.createPages, which is automatically called by Gatsby itself. It includes all sorts of stuff that the API documents pretty well. But one of the things we can do is we can query the GraphQL. So what we're saying is give us the first 1,000 remarks, give us the nodes with the slug and an excerpt. So an excerpt is just like the first 160 characters of the post. Then with the resolved file of the blog list, we're going to pass that as the component path. The / is the page path that we want to go to. So we'll probably want to delete the index here so it doesn't conflict. And then we're passing context as posts. So this is just from the data from the GraphQL query. Post.node is what allows us to grab all the posts. So now if we restart the build, because we've again modified something in Gatsby Node, every time we do that, we have to restart the build. As we go further on, we'll have to restart the build less and less. We hit an error. What is the error in question? Gatsby Node created a page with a component that does not exist. Source template. It's templates. There we go. Restart it. I love how everything is decided to tell me that I need to update right before or during the talk. I just find that funny. So now we can see that there is one list item here, and it is the, what is the term? It's the shorthand of the post. I forget what the word is. What am I forgetting? Excerpt, the excerpt of the post. Man, the words you forget sometimes. So that's cool and all. That's cool. The only problem is I want to be able to see the title. I think titles are cool. I like titles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add something called a Frontmatter. Frontmatter is a standardization that's applied to Markdown files. It's like an extension on Markdown, and it's just this little blurb up here. It allows us to contain metadata about our posts. So instead of keeping some JSON separate from the file about the file, we can keep our title and our date of publishing and all sorts of other stuff right in line up here. So let's update our Gatsby node. We will add Frontmatter title. Oh, sorry, it's not fields, it's Frontmatter. So we'll add the Frontmatter title. And you know what, just for kicks, we'll make sure that it sorts in the right order as well. Because we're just using GraphQL, so we can sort based on a certain field. This will allow us to have the top be the most recent post. And then all we're going to do is we're going to go into our post list. And instead of excerpt, we're going to say frontmatter.title. Probably going to have to restart the build because, again, we updated something in Gatsby node. Let's restart this. There we go. Now we can see the title instead. Pretty snazzy. So let's go ahead and add the blog page. So we can actually see the post itself, all sorts of that good stuff. So let's go ahead and make a new template. We'll call it blogpost.jsx. I'm again going to copy some of this. So what we have here is we have a dangerously set inner HTML so that we can apply that markdown HTML to this page. We have something called a page query, which is automatically ran. It looks through all these templates and automatically runs anything that has page query on it. And it's going to pass us the markdown file with the slug and provide us some HTML and slug data. Finally, we'll go into Gatsby node. We'll add in another thing here. We'll do blog post equals path.resolve source templates blog post. And then we'll say for each of these posts, we want to pass as a context the slug of that post. We'll do path post /slug, and it'll be pretty cute. So you'll see that we're using slug from here. Can I explain why dangerously set inner HTML is needed? It's just so that we can free-formly pass the HTML in here. Dangerously set inner HTML. Actually, let's look at the localhost. So if you look here at the query data that we're able to grab from here, you can see the HTML that is parsed from the markdown. So Gatsby's plugin, the Remark plugin, will take this markdown, parse it into HTML, and then in order to display that HTML into the page itself, you will have to use the dangerously set inner HTML in order to apply that HTML to the page. Make sense? I'm going to keep going, but if you do need more clarification, feel free to stop me. Yes, cool. While we're at it, let's go ahead and update this code so that we have links to each of the posts. Whoa. So what we're saying here is because Gatsby allows you to do some client-side updates as well, we're using the custom link instead of like an A tag, but it's more or less the same thing. So we're just saying for each of these items in the list, make a link to that post itself. So we'll restart the build because we've updated Gatsby node. I've said that like 30 times now. It's going to become a meme. This is Twitch, darn it. This is where memes were born. All right. So now I can see the post name. I can open it and ta-da. Oh, the reason why it was showing the old one is because I copied the code that said excerpt. So if we change it to frontmatter.title again, we can go back, see the title, and now we see the rendered HTML. LUL. Yes. Awesome. So that's pretty cool. Let's see here. Let's do multi-authors. Let's add authors and let's make it multi-author. Let's author it up. That's what I'm saying. So all I had to do was I added a package called Gatsby Transformer JSON. In my node, I'm going to define, let's say that I want to see author's name. That's what I want it to be. It's not what it is right now, but that's what I want it to be in the future. So if you'll know, authors is an array of objects. Name is going to be one of those properties. So what I'm going to have to do, yes, thank you for the emotes. I appreciate it. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to create a JSON file. So nope, not in there. Not in there either. All right, root called data, and we'll call this file authors.json. Now I have already prepared this file. So we can see it includes an ID for me. So this is a unique ID for each author. It includes my first and last name. It includes my Twitter and my website. I'm forgetting some things here. You actually, for the SEO later, you want to store the first name and last name separately. So I'll add that now. And then finally, in order to add this as data essentially to the Markdown Gatsby, we're going to go into the Gatsby config, and we're going to say, comma, I'm actually going to add that a bit earlier. We're going to say resolve Gatsby source file system. We're going to say options path name / data. I realize I did not have a colon there. That tends to be important. We'll leave the name off for now. Yes, I know. We're also going to add in the Gatsby transform JSON. And then we're going to do something called a mapping. So what we're saying here is if we add in authors, what's going to happen is that it's going to look for every time frontmatter.authors is made, and then it's going to do a mapping of this ID to the ID field here, which is pretty neato. So now every time I query authors, I'm able to query name, just like I was able to do so in Gatsby node here. And that should be most of it. So I'm going to go into the blog post. I'm going to say, give me this data. Hang on. Cool. So I'm going to say, give me that. I'm going to make sure author's names is an array that I map to get author. And then finally, I'll need author's name. So now I'm querying for the author's name here. And then inside of the post list component, I'm going to have a bit more code under posts like this. So I'm just doing the same thing of joining all the author's name together with a colon, comma, not a colon. And then I'm saying link to that post, that title by, and then the author's names. So now we'll restart the build. Everything broke, as usual. Let's see here. Cannot find field authors. How's the mapping magic done? Again, it's just because if you look at config. So if you look here, it's this type of file, because it's parsed by remark, is called the markdown remark. So it's parsed by this package. Then it's called the markdown remark.frontmatter, which is this, .authors, which is this. And then it's mapping to something called authors JSON. Authors is the name here. And then when we added it as the path data, it looks for authors.json. And then it maps this to the ID field here. inside of this array. That's how the mapping magic is done. I strongly suspect that it wants double quotes, although maybe it's not quite that specific. If it's just that, I'm going to laugh. Not going to lie. That will be humorous to me. It's not it. What's happening here? There was an error. Oh, okay. It can't find authors on the remark file because it's under, so I'm updating my query wrong somewhere. It's under Frontmatter, yes. Because it's Frontmatter authors, not just Markdown authors. So if I start this again, now that I have fixed the queries, that should hypothetically run. Come on. Oh, it's already finished. I was just staring at a screen for no reason. Awesome. So we can see that it's by me. And we can go back and we can say it's my first blog post by Corbin. So if we were to add more people, we could say something along the lines of like, Joe with Joe Frank. That's a good name. I know, isn't that such a good blog post? It was really insightful. So now I'm going to say Crutchcorn and Joe. And you can see that it now lists more than one person, which is great. Multi-author support. I'm going to remove this just because it makes things a little bit harder. But there we go. So now that we have that, let's add an authors page. Authors pages are cool. I'm going to minimize some of this just so that it's a little bit more readable. Under templates, we're going to add a new one. It's going to be called author page.jsx. You get the drill by now. We're going to add in the HTML. Oh no, I changed my mouse settings wrong somehow. There we go. Click the wrong button. So essentially all we're saying here is grab data from our query, grab page context from the page context. So we're able to mix and match both of them. And then we're saying the header should include the author name, their social media accounts, and then that's not correct. Their website should just be a website. There we go. And then what we're saying is list the posts as if they were elsewhere. And then, see here, we will add in a query. So instead of just querying all Markdown remark, we're able to also add in saying all authors JSON. So authors JSON was from that JSON file that's up here. Now we're saying give us all of them, give us the IDs of them. And now we can say under posts, give us the authorized IDs. And then finally, for each of those author IDs, go ahead and filter out which posts are theirs based on which IDs match up there, and then create the page authors / so on and so forth. Let's see here, was there more? Yes, and then under blog post, we'll update that H2 to actually be a link. We'll just say the first author, link it to them because they get all the glory for no reason. You can actually handle this much better, but this is just a quick example. And then, boom. So now, restarting the build. Something didn't work out. Author page. It's because I didn't define the author page in here. So right up here, we want to have author page, author page.jsx. Perfect. Keep in mind, I know this site looks really simplistic right now. I promise we're going to get to there. Or at least I will address it. For what it's worth, I was able to complete this website in like, I don't know, an hour or two at most. There's not a page yet at authors undefined, which means that this is undefined. And why is that? It's because I'm not passing ID. That's why. Sorry about that, gang. Notice that it caches most of the builds so that the build that comes afterwards is always faster. Whatever. We'll go to the page manually. There we go. So now we can see the posts that are just associated with me. Granted, it would be a lot cooler if we had more posts, which we will get to shortly. But yeah. So, please work, please work. It didn't work. Let's see here. Show in File Explorer. Sweet. So I have this picture of myself. I'm going to put this in data, and here's why. We're going to add it as a profile picture so that each author can have a nice little profile picture for their page. And then under author page, this is where things get a bit interesting. Under name, we're able to query for child image sharp. All of this is handled by, where is it? Anyways, Gatsby will automatically handle all of the image data under particular labels inside of the GraphQL instance. And then you can say things like, give me an image size with the fixed width of 500. And then you're able to say, give me the source of the image so that during build, it will automatically go in and resize the image for you to that exact size so that you can use it later. And then all I have to do is add a source. That's it. So now you can see this lovely little picture of mine. Super good. A friend of mine took it for me. All right. So we have, ignoring the styles, which we'll get to, we have a nice little website, right? Like we have, oh no, that's not good. Yeah, we have, that's a live refresh issue, but we have blog post lists, blog post author page. I still don't know why that's happening. That's okay. It's a nice little website. Let's get some SEO in there, which has an early version. So if we look under our components, we have all these components which are not being used anymore. But then we also have SEO.js. This is using a helmet query and includes such wonderful things as the OG type of the website. So if you're not familiar with what SEO is, it's what allows Google to understand what type of website you are so that it can rank you properly. And SEO is relatively simple, at least once you get the hang of it. So under posts, we're going to do some tags so that we're able to tell Google what this post is about. We're going to add some descriptions so that we can tell Google what to show. Because if you Google like Angular, you need to see like this example right down here of what the description would be. So this is what we're programming here. And then under SEO, I'm going to remove the OG type and the Twitter creator, just because the Twitter creator isn't really valid right now. You could do it later and then map it out, but we're not going to do so. And then OG type we're going to configure for each page individually. And then under author page, we're going to add in a component that looks like this. What we're saying here is provide the title as the author name for this page. The description should be profile page for blank. And then meta type, there's something called OG profile. Profile first name, profile last name, and then the username for that author. So it's under, what is it? OG tags. They have a whole website that's dedicated to this. That explains which tags to use when, what tags are available, and it'll help you with social media and all sorts of other things. So I'm going to import that SEO tag from components, SEO. Really quickly, I can't remember if it was a named export or default export. It was a default export, haha. Mwahaha. We're gonna update the blog list to be a little different. So the list is gonna be much more straightforward because there's not too much metadata that we can include. We're just saying that it's of type website. And of course, it doesn't want to format for me because it doesn't like me, which that's fair, I guess. It doesn't have to like me. And then here we go. Here, finally, the SEO will say, what's it saying here? It's saying title as the post title, description as the post description, which we need to add. That's why I wasn't listing the title earlier, probably. Yeah, so we're saying the time it was published, the author itself, and then the tags. So all sorts of good stuff. Author, tags, and then there we go. So now I'm going to restart the build again, just because it doesn't like that I deleted some files. Didn't like that. What didn't it like? Cannot resolve components layout. That's from Pages, isn't it? Yep, sure enough. I deleted something that was being used. How dare I? We're also going to delete page 2 entirely because we're not using it. And it might actually interfere with us in the future. Restart it. What's happening? Stop. There we go. This is unfortunate. Cannot query title on type remark markdown. That's because on the post page, I put title here instead of in here, which is where it belongs. Because it is in the Frontmatter, so is the tag, so is the description. I keep putting them on the wrong thing. Surprised at how close we are to being done with this. I suppose after 40 minutes I shouldn't be surprised, but here we are. All right, so go back to the page. So we can see nothing's changed visually, but if we look under the header, you can see all of these meta tags. So twitter.card, description, OG title, all of these things. And these are built during build time. So SEO is going to pick on those immediately, which is very nice. So I am now, pagination is hard to do without a lot of, pages. So I have made 6 posts here. I'm going to remove the existing post. And then we are going to put, here, I'll copy it this way. Streaming, blog site, posts. There we have it. So now we have 6 posts that should be ready to go. So now if I stop the build and restart it, in typical development, I swear you don't have to restart the build this often. It's just that we're very early on. So here you can see that we have 6 posts that are all ready to go. So let's add some pagination. We do that inside of the Gatsby node file, as usual. So we're going to define a constant at the very top that says the maximum number of articles on a page. We're going to have this line of code which says post pages. So this basically just takes the max number on a page and then makes an array of arrays. And then what we'll do is for the root page, instead of just posts, we'll say posts is the page 0, and then includes the page context of 0. And then we will say for each page of the post pages after 0, so we don't want to recreate page 1, create page / so we'll start at page 2, page 3, so on and so forth, and that's how we'll do that. So let's restart. So in this example, we should not see my first post. We should see my second post, and then we should be able to manually go to page 2. Awesome. So let's restart. That doesn't look like it's a thing. What's happening? Cannot access post before initialization, so we need to move this down. I copied and pasted into the wrong place. It's like Stack Overflow all over again. There's a problem with me being comfortable streaming in my own home. I get weird. I get just as weird as I am in real life. All right. So you can say we no longer have my first blog post. We only have my second blog post. Then we'll go to page 2. And you can see that's where my first blog post is. That's awesome. Super cool. So, let's see here. I am going to copy a file called pagination. This is a component that I had built beforehand. We're going to have an index.js, and we're going to have a pagination. Oh, you jerk. Cut me off while I was typing. Why'd you do that, computer? Stop! What is happening? Oh my goodness. Wow. So very rude, computer. I don't appreciate it. We're going to do export star from pagination.jsx, and then our JSX file is going to look something like this. So we're just using a package called React Paginate. We pass in the page count, the page index, the root path, and the page path. So, you know, the root path is / the page path is / page 2, so on and so forth. Yeah, just a bit of styling there. Well, I say styling in kind of big quotes. So we'll go into our blog list, and we will say pagination. And then we will pass in all of these parameters. All right, grab from there. We will also need to grab more data from our page context. So we're grabbing the page count. Let's see here. In our node, we're passing posts. We need to pass page count as well. We'll pass the posts for that page, the page index, and the total page count. So now, I also need to import. That tends to help. Import pagination from components.pagination. There we go. That should be it. All right, so now if we restart, you can see that I can go to the previous page, I can go to the next page, all sorts of good stuff. So we can add that to the author page, and then we can also add some generic styling. And instead of forcing everyone to grunt through all of that, I'm actually just going to go to the example that I've built here, which just adds a tiny bit of styling and fixes up some other minor stuff that somehow I missed during the live code. But it is all open source, so I will share it in the chat. Again, there's maybe 10 commits on this example repo altogether. Now, if we go to localhost 8000, you can see that it's a bit cleaner here. We have the pages, 1, 2. We have a bit of centering here. Our authors page has some icons here. So it's just a tiny bit of cleanup, a little bit of styling, but it's the same exact, like I was going through commit by commit and adding in the functionality as we went. So you can see that within 40 minutes of even live coding, we were able to get something relatively nice looking here. So there's one more thing that I want to mention. One last thing. We have the ability to not only initialize on the development side, but once we ship the HTML and CSS, we have to wait for React to reinitialize on the user machine. This isn't a huge problem for something like this simple website. In this example, I think I can entirely just turn off. I don't know where it is, but I'm not going to bother looking for it. But you can turn off JavaScript, and this website in particular will work perfectly fine. But in some instances, because you have to reinitialize on the client once the page renders for the first time, you can take a small performance hit. This is all outlined in a blog post that I just wrote for my website, which is called What is SSR and SSG? It explains, outlines, and describes why that happens, what you can do to sidestep it, and if it realistically even impacts you. In some instances, your Lighthouse score may go down, but your user experience is significantly better. There's a fun anecdote in there explaining how that works. So feel free to share that. I'll actually copy the post and put it in the chat as well. So yeah. Neko's on the ball. Good work. Also, don't put beta on there. Oh, did I do that? Oh, I sure did. I put the beta post. But either way, if you link beta dot, or if you just go to the normal one. I'm dumb enough to put the... we have a staging environment for our blog site, and that starts with beta.unicorn. And I don't know why that link goes to there, but it sure does. All right. Are there any questions? Does anyone want to look at anything in particular? Do we want to go through the source code of the template app that I was explaining? Anything? Any questions? I'm going to be sipping on this Canada Dry until someone asks a question. I don't have much Canada Dry left, so y'all better start asking questions. Yeah. Anecdote is fun. It's a good story. It's kind of long, but do you have recommendations on how to pick a Gatsby starter? Well, this is a really good Gatsby starter that I made. No. It depends on what you're looking for. Gatsby has a ton of starters. Like, where is it? I don't know where it is. Gatsby starters. Yeah, it depends. They have all sorts of stuff. If you like TypeScript, go with TypeScript. They have some SCSS stuff in here. They have some material stuff in here. I will say this much. The more... I find personally that adding things to Gatsby is easy enough that you can start with just the base template and build up from there, adding things as you need. For example, I've done that on my website, and I've been able to add in filters, search. I've been able to add in, it's not present in this version, but like a sidebar with content. So like Gatsby is easy enough to develop for that you could realistically start with any template. And I tend to find that adding content in is easier than removing content for some of these Gatsby starters. So just depends. Yeah. What's funny is that I thought that same question for a long time. I was like, oh, which starter should I start with? Which starter? And then at some point, I just threw away all the code of the starter that I did start with, just because none of it really fit. So I just went with and built my own stuff from scratch for the most part. So Gatsby makes that a lot easier than you would think. So cool. Anything else? Does anyone want to hear about Next.js? Next.js is a bit interesting. One of the biggest advantages of Gatsby used to be that you couldn't do static site exports from Next.js. But Next.js has been a bit interesting in that they've added in the functionality as of Next.js 9.3. You're able to do static site generation. So you can do a combination of static site generation and server-side rendering, depending on which route you want to do what. So they've really upped their game. I'm still waiting for their plugin system, but it'll be interesting to watch them as they come. Themes are new. Do you recommend to stick a theme which gets updated instead of a starter? I sure do. Or at least I wish I could. I think themes are really cool. My problem... Let me put it this way. Themes are awesome. And I think they're a really great way to provide like a base level of functionality. With unicorn utterances, which I'm only mentioning just because this is the reason why I have not gone with themes. I have a designer, or at least we have a few designers who are super amazing at what they do. They take care of like even the small details of hovering over what happens, the animation, all that stuff. We had a very, very, very custom vision of what we wanted to do. And as a result, I didn't stick with a theme just because I wanted something super custom. But let's be honest. If you're wanting to do a website with WordPress, themes are probably going to be the way to go anyways. If you're not looking to customize a ton, I'm not saying that you can't do that with WordPress. But if you want something that's ready to go, that you have a little bit of leeway with customizing, but generally has the same look, totally go for themes. Highly recommend. But it's just, I tend to like much more of like the ejected pattern where I'm kind of more on my own, free to do more what I want, but also, of course, having to maintain that more and more. So. Unicorn utterance is a public repo. It absolutely is. Not only is the code open source, but all the content is either Creative Commons or public domain. We've done a really good job at keeping things as open as possible. In fact, I've made multiple... I'm hoping to contribute more to Gatsby's upstream. I've made a few issues, and I continue to work on that. We have a few NPM packages that we've published as a result of working on unicorn utterances. And furthermore, if anyone wants to ask questions about Gatsby, or like they get stuck, or maybe they want to fork unicorn utterances to their own blog, which I highly recommend, even though we accept contributions from anyone, and we always are looking for and welcome contributions in terms of articles or code. If you do want to take our code and make your own blog, we totally welcome that. We think that's great. But please feel free to drop by our Discord and say, hey, why did you write this code so bad? And we'll give some justification, even if it's just pointing a finger at Corbin, which is a good reason to point a finger at Corbin. So... We've put a lot of time and energy and effort into this website. And there's a lot more that you can't see here because they're in work in progress branches that I should be merging in soon. So. I'm not going to lie, these numbers are slightly inflated, but that's because we use Git to track our editing process for our articles as well. But it's still a pretty high number, even just looking at the development alone. It's been extensive enough that we've had to break out some of our UI helpers to a library that we call Batteries Not Included. And essentially, it takes some React hook code and make some very, very abstract assumptions about what you're trying to do. So that's pretty cool. It's not specific to Gatsby or anything like that. It's just some fun React code. So, yeah. First time at SAC.js meetup and new member. This is awesome. Thanks, Corbin. Thank you, Matt. Glad you're able to join us. So to use a CMS for the blog post, I'm familiar with SSG and useful something like Contentful. You absolutely can. There's plugins for Contentful. There's plugins for a lot of things. I don't personally, and the reason why I don't is because I wanted to track with GitHub. I wanted to be as transparent, as public as anything as we can be. So all of our content is right here in this folder. I wanted to make sure that you didn't have to make an account and do this and this and this and this and this in order to make a blog post for us. We wanted to reduce friction for newcomers contributing to the project as much as feasible, so that not only one, is it easy to edit and contribute to the website, but two, it's free, it's public, you know? So it's kind of, it was our driving morals as a group to make that decision, but you absolutely can use a CMS for blog posts. One of the nice things, and this is going to be a huge shout out. So Evelyn Hathaway, who is Neko Overflow in the chat, she's been doing some instrumental work for us. I know I mentioned a CI pipeline that's done entirely through GitHub Actions, which you're also able to do. I highly recommend using some form of CI CD system. So every single pull request we make to the main branch, we have a beta branch and we have a release branch. So our beta branch right now is up to date with our live branch, so it's exactly the same. But you're able to get live previews, and she's done all the work to set up workflows on GitHub. So she's been absolutely instrumental. Hey, AK, welcome. You're joining a local meetup for developers that just happens to have gone virtual this month. So yeah, the nice part about SSG is that because it's so build dependent, and because you're able to deploy using CMS, you can use something like Zeet Now or Gatsby Cloud in order to get like preview links for every single branch that you're cutting a release off of. You're able to look at, you're able to gain a ton of introspection from the metadata of your builds themselves, which is awesome. So huge plus for using a CI/CD pipeline. I realize I've gone silent. Seems like folks are tending to drop out. But yeah, so I'm gonna add a plug for myself because I can. I do live streams every Thursday. I do live streams every now and then, side by side. Yes, building your own small deployment script is fun. Neko would know. She's awesome. But yeah, so I do live streams like this every now and then. So if anyone wants to join us for any of those, always welcome. So yeah, I'm going to call it here. Thanks everyone for joining. I know it was a bit short today, but I do appreciate all the interaction. Yeah, feel free to drop by any other time. Join our Discord, chat with us, hang out, have a good time. Join the SAC.js if you're in Sacramento. Join the SAC.js Slack because they're awesome. Great place to communicate with everyone locally. So yeah, let me see. Actually, I'm going to copy the SAC.js. Yes, our recording is going to be made available later for sure. This is the SAC.js link. If anyone wants to join that, if you're not there for some reason and you're in Sacramento and you're a developer, that's the place to go. Or our Discord. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So. All right. Well, thanks, gang.